Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I have a guest with me, Krista. Hi, Krista. Thanks for joining me. Krista was actually one of my clients, and we did a lot of growth and building of her business. And so I wanted to talk to her today and just get her insights on what that's like on her side of it to actually build the business and the changes that she's had to make to her business during these really crazy pandemic times. So Krista is a public speaking and business coach, but I will let you introduce yourself a little bit more about your background and your transition to becoming an entrepreneur and kind of like where you are today.
Okay, so big question because there's a lot of ground to cover.
Yeah,
As there always is.
I know. Sorry, I was like, tell me everything about yourself.
Yeah. So I think it's worth noting that because it folds into the story that I've always been a chronic overachiever. I I graduated high school in 3 years, then I graduated undergrad in 2.5 years.
Oh my
I
gosh.
graduated grad school in 1.5 years while holding down a full-time teaching job. All that is to say that then I moved into corporate America very quickly from there in order to pay off all of that student debt that was wonderfully acquired. And I just, I got in this place where as an overachiever, I was really focused on like, what's the next step? What's the next move? How do I climb the ladder? And I had, I would say it was a really fulfilling career in commercial real estate. I worked for 2 of the largest commercial real estate companies in the world. And both of them just gave me incredible opportunities. And I think I would say I met them with like great enthusiasm until, my corporate career ended with a job as a COO of a $40 million furniture company. So, I kind of like rose the ranks pretty quickly and found myself in kind of management and leadership positions, all until I think, if I'm being completely honest, I think I just hit a point of burnout, right? Like I was just hustling for hustle's sake.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's probably a pretty common experience of just like, what's the purpose? What's this all for? And so my experience is probably a little different, and I don't recommend it to people because I just had to hit the eject button. Like I remember that day of going in and being like, hey, you know what? There's absolutely nothing wrong with this job. Like this has been a tremendous opportunity. I freaking love being here, but I need to take a step away. And I really hope to hell that there's a job for me in 6 months because I don't know what I'm going to do. But I felt like a deep intuitive knowing that like I just needed time.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't actually have a plan for what I was going to do. I just, I started reading. Taylor, I know you're super interested in like starting to get more interested in mindset work and like kind of learning about more like, we don't just hone our craft, which we spend a lot of time like getting really good at what we do. Mm-hmm. We also like, for some of us, spend a lot of time at like honing our bodies, right? Like showing up to the gym and getting better in our bodies, but sometimes we don't hone our minds. Like we forget that third part of like so much of how we act is like what's going on in our brain. Are we coming from a positive place? And for me, I just like started reading everything I possibly could. And something that really stuck out to me was, I'm super into like philosophy and theology and all the like weird stuff you can't actually see, but Stoicism, right? So Stoicism is like a group of philosophers from a long ass time ago that said, at the end of the day, the thing that makes people great is not their ability to pursue their strengths. It's their ability to sit with and really spend time with their obstacles, right? And it's like figure out like how to, when either there's something that like you really want to do that you're not good at, right? That's holding you back. If you're like, I really want to start this company, but I don't feel confident in my leadership skills. How do you actually lean into that? Mm-hmm. If you feel like, so whether that's like internally caused or potentially externally caused, coronavirus, right? Where you're like, I started this business and shit, like there's no public speaking events. So what do I do, right? So like, how do you really hone that ability just to sit and be uncomfortable? And at that time for me, It was all about public speaking. The one thing that made me more uncomfortable than anything else was getting up on stage and talking to a group of people. And so I just had this incredibly fortunate opportunity to be like, hey, I got 6 months. I don't need to do anything else. So I'm just going to start speaking. And I don't know what I'm going to speak about. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm just going to start and I'm going to figure it out along the way. And hopefully I figure out how to be better at it so that when I go back to my corporate career, I'm more effective at this whole speaking thing. And it was in that, right? The obstacle is the way, right? So like it was in that I realized I'm not the only person afraid of public speaking, right? Which is duh. But there are a lot of people who are on this journey. And if I can be on this journey, if I can just be one step ahead of somebody else, then I can help somebody else. Like I don't have to have it all figured out. I don't need to be the world's best public speaker in order to be a public speaking coach. I just need to be one step ahead of the next person so that I can say, hey, I got you. I was there. This is what you need to do. I found like, even in my work with corporate America, that, you know, a lot of the public speaking coaches that I was introduced to, or sales coaches or pitch coaches, they all just like, they were great. You know, they were like born out of the womb being like, yeah, get me in front of the room, jazz hands, you know? And so they actually couldn't help me with the mindset work that I really needed to do to understand how to be more confident. So that's a long way. That was a big question, in all fairness.
It was a big question. That was my bad. But you gave us a lot of really good things in there. One, going back to the very beginning, I think your feeling of like, there's nothing wrong with this, but I need to step away. I think that's something that people experience more often than we realize. I think we just don't talk about it. Or we don't know how to step away. And so we just keep that feeling to ourselves because we don't know what the options are. So hopefully through this channel and a lot of things I talk about, like my goal is to give people options, right?
Yeah. So I talk about this in terms of like the push and pull factor. So in economics, right, they talk about like push and pull economics. They're two different things. Are you being pushed to do something, or are you being pulled? Carrot or stick, essentially. And I think oftentimes there's a lot of conversation, or a lot of people talk about the push factors behind leaving a job. And I think it's actually not the best way to think about it, right? You can be incredibly unhappy in a job. And that's like, if you need to leave that job, you need to leave that job. That happens. But like really spending time to think about like what's pulling me towards, right? And like, that's the thing for me where I was like, I'm completely satisfied. I freaking love this job. I love what I'm doing, but I am being pulled towards the next direction. And so how do I just find space and grace to be able to move towards that?
And then the other thing that you kind of talked about was like, you had that 6 months, which I always love that story. That you were like, I was not a good public speaker, which is why I became a public speaking coach, right? Like I learned how to do it so I could teach you how to do it. And I think you're a phenomenal public speaking person now. Like I love watching your videos. You have such like charisma and character. And so I feel like you've done a really good job, right? Like leaning into that obstacle. But in those 6 months, and even more recently, the last few months with your business slowing down due to coronavirus, I know you've kind of started a new business slowly, but like, so when you don't know what you want to do, right? Like you left your corporate job, you had no idea. How do you start to slowly build that new business? Like what are those practical steps that you think people have to go through?
Yeah. Okay, so this is good. I think this is a really great question because I think we get tripped up. Our brains can convince us that we need to have it all figured out before we can take the next right action. And what I have really found in my own business, even in like regardless of the amount of success that you find in a business, you're always, well, I'll just say I'm personally very focused on growth, right? Like I don't ever want to get stuck or stagnated, even if it's working just perfectly. Like I'm like, okay, what's the next thing? So when you're talking about growth, it's really important to think about like, what's this, you know, tech startups will call it an M.V.P, which you actually helped me with a ton of thinking through like, what's the minimum viable product in order to get this launched? right? So instead of like having to like take the whole thing down and be like, I've got to figure out this like massive system. And that's something that like we'll talk about is like, what are all those systems and where do you start? But like, what's the smallest viable offering that you can start with to just say like, hey, I've got this thing that I think would be really beneficial for you. I've thought a lot about it. It's an offering that I'm really excited about. What do you think? And you don't have so much on the line that you need people that they have to say yes, right? Like you can really say it in this way that's just like, gosh, this is really exciting for me. I think it would be really helpful for you. What do you think? And if they say no, you can also, then you're like, you're in this space where you're like, cool, next person.
Yeah.
Like it's not all on the line. And so really thinking through like, what's the smallest possible offering? Does that answer your question?
Yes. Yes, it does. Smallest possible offering. But then also like, okay, so you decide that. What's the next step after that, do you think?
For me, I have focused on my public speaking and growth coaching business, which I still do, but I have always been really interested in business coaching and using astrology. So one of the things that I have really been working on as an entrepreneur is like, how do you find less hustle, right? Like, how do you get out of that place where you feel like you're pushing the boulder up the damn hill? Because entrepreneurship is a lot of work.
It is, yes.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And so
And it idolizes hustle, right? There's this piece of it that idolizes that part of it. Whereas if you're not hustling, then you're not doing it right, which is not true.
Yeah. Super value on the like, oh, I just needed to grind through it, right? And there's some truth to like, you're not going to always wanna, but there's also a side of entrepreneurship where I think you can get really caught in the like, oh, I just need to keep working on my website. It's not good enough. I need to keep working on my mailing list. I need to get out another video. Oh my gosh, my social media isn't good enough. Oh my gosh, I need to do this and that. And I'm not successful enough because I haven't built or I haven't spent enough time getting all these other things in place.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And it is a trick of the mind to say, if I stay busy, then it's my own fault for not being successful.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Or that busy equals successful.
Or that busy equals successful. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So really, how do we create a little bit more flow as entrepreneurs, even as professionals in our careers, wherever we're at? Like, how do we just really slow down and connect into the work that we need to do on the inside in order for that to reflect on the outside? And for a long ass time, I had this equation in my head that said, the more I work, the more success I will create, which is true, right? But it also puts your time as a quantity that's directly related to your success. So the only thing that's going to make you more successful is the more you work. And that in and of itself, while true, is a very limiting way of looking at it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So I have had to learn that there is something about being in the right place at the right time also creates success. Right? Like that's flow. It's like really listening to where should you be, like allowing those messages, those downloads that happen of just like, oh, this is what's right for me. And this is where I need to put that energy in order to create that success and allow the success to come rather than be something that like you're pushing at.
Yeah.
Just like hustling towards.
And so I think I read a book and it kind of broke it down into 3 parts. It was like the first part was like your mindset, right? Like you putting the right energy out to the universe. The universe like taking that and allowing different, this to happen or this opportunity to appear, but then you have to allow it. So the universe is always working in your favor, but are you allowing those successes? Like, right? Like you might be giving out the right energy, but if you're not allowing it to come in, then you're still not going to get anywhere. That's where I was trying to go with that.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And, I think in terms of that, like, this is actually a really good piece of advice for any entrepreneur that I think I knew, but I didn't really take to heart. In terms of this journey of success and like being able to co-create with the universe and being able to have the right mindset. Part of this is about like really being intentional when you go into entrepreneurship about why are you doing this?
Mm-hmm.
What's the thing that you want to embody? What's the thing that you want to find in your own life? All of us have something, right? And yes, there's this thing where it's like, I want to create something, I want to be successful, I want to be recognized for something, right? But for me personally, like I could have done that in corporate America. Like there's 1,000 ways to get there. So
Mm-hmm.
what is it that's calling you to the lifestyle that you want to create in order to have that success? Like, how do you want to feel when you have that success, right?
Mm-hmm. And that leads into my next question, but real fast, I just want to recap because we've talked about a lot. It's been really valuable information. But those first few steps to getting started in a business when you have no idea is lean into your obstacles, right? Lean into those things that make you uncomfortable. Work on your mindset, like understand why you're going into working for your business, for yourself. Um, and then find that MVP, right? The like smallest viable product that you can offer to get started to start gaining that momentum. Does that sound about right?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's so good. Look at you. Man.
Okay, but then that leads me into what you just talked about, which was right, like you created this product and you kind of put it out there, and and you've worked with creating packages and stuff. So what are some of those systems that have allowed you to take something from your journal and put it into a packaged production product?
Yeah. So this is good because I think, as you start on this journey of whether becoming a full-time or a part-time entrepreneur, wherever you find yourself, or perhaps just a multi-passionate entrepreneur that has like 3 or 4 things that you're doing
Mhm.
too, right? And actually, if I'm being honest, like within my public speaking business, there's like sub businesses too. So
Mhm.
kind of being really clear about what those offerings are. But wherever you're at, I think one of the hardest things to do is to invest in yourself. Like really slow down and say, I need a system, I need a process in order to make this successful. And to know yourself well enough to know like what that system, what like how you can seek out help that will be most supportive to you. So for me, when I started public speaking coaching, I started my business for a full year before I like paid anybody. And then the first thing that I spent money on was B School. And B School is Marie Forleo's program. It's an online digital-based platform to teach you how to start online-based business. I'm not an affiliate. I don't think you are, Taylor. Have you seen B School?
No, I've never done it, but I know a lot of people who have.
Yeah. Yeah. So for me, B School was just this like really good thing to be like, okay, here's the structures, here's the things that I need to build and like understand where I was spinning my wheels for no value.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a very good holistic structure. But I was somebody who like you can give me a book and I'm so good at like following step by step and implementing it and just being like, okay, this is like that's my jam. Capricorn energy, speaking of astrology, like that's a very Capricorn thing or an earth thing to do. There are definitely people who are like, yeah, you give me a process and that sounds boring. Like I need that one-on-one feedback. I need that engagement from a coach to hold me accountable. And so those people might be better, like if they're very creative, if they're very, they're great communicators, but they're a little bit disorganized. Those people might benefit from like having a business coach.
Mm-hmm.
Like go and invest that money to like have an entrepreneur coach to like encourage you to go through those steps.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the third option is somebody who is disorganized, right? They're like, I know I got this thing. I'm out there. I'm talking to people. I'm doing whatever, but I ain't got no systems. I don't know, it's like you don't actually know what your package is, what your offerings are. You're just talking to people. And then you're like, oh crap, I need to follow up and send somebody a contract. And I don't know how to do that. Like you've got to get a virtual assistant or an online business manager or just like somebody who is actually on the nuts and bolts, because a coach isn't going to do that for you. Mm-hmm. They're like telling you how to do it for yourself. Mm-hmm. But if you're that level of disorganized, like as you start out, just invest in a VA right away. Mm-hmm. The thing I would say about all of that stuff though, is when you are starting, don't let anybody do it Like you can hire somebody to help you
Mm-hmm.
stay engaged in like, what are you creating? So don't ever think, and I made this mistake that, and it makes sense that you just want to be able to outsource something. You're like, this is really hard for me, so I'll just hire somebody else and they'll take care of it. And when it is just you, when you are just starting out, you are your brand. And so being very intentional about everything that you have, and like, you don't have to create it to have your hands on it, and make sure that it reflects you. That's what's going to make you different. And if you just outsource it to somebody else, then you are going to become generic.
Mm-hmm.
And you can be generic when you're 500 to 1,000 people. You cannot be generic when it's just you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's also important, because if you are starting to outsource some things, understanding how things work. So I want to say, what is her name? Can't think of her name. She's a really popular coach. But I took a course, or like a little webinar thing from her now copywriter. But her copywriter even said, she was like, she did this herself for 5 years. So she knows exactly how it works, what she wants. I know, write the things for her, but she reviews it. She's involved in the process and things like that. And I was like, okay. And that's when I think it hit me. This is early on in my career too, but like, it is important to know how the things work. And so a lot of people hire me to set up their systems, to like get their website running, or, get things talking to each other. A lot of them are not interested in knowing the nitty gritty of how it works, but I prefer to share that, whether if it's even just a Loom video, to say, like, we both can use ConvertKit, right? Which is my favorite email marketing platform. But I set it up for a client of mine this week. To be fair, they did ask me, like, can you show us how this works? Because I do have to go in there. So I just created a Loom video, and I said, this is how it's laid out. Here's what I've done so far to set it up, and here's how you send out an email. Which I think ConvertKit's pretty intuitive, but you also have to remember that people have different levels of knowledge, and they're coming in with different skills and strengths. And so updating a website may not be easy for them. I've done that for people too. They would pay me to go through and update stuff, and they'd be like, how do I do this myself? And I'll create a video and I'll show them, here's how you do it yourself. Now, typically they still don't want to learn how to do it. Like, that's kind of what they're like, oh, that was more than I was willing to get into. But at least you have the base knowledge, right? You have an idea of how it works, and this person you're outsourcing stuff to, how they're doing their job.
Yeah. And
I think that's important.
That's one of the things, like, you as an online business manager have been so good at, like, as we've worked together, you have always been really good at being transparent. And I have heard, and I've never worked with another VA, but like, I've heard that there are people out there who want to like hold on to the systems, or like control it, and not be, because that's how they continue to work, right? Like, especially on like a website backend or whatever. And so as you're thinking through, like, how do I get support, make sure you find somebody who they're not selling you the perfect solution, and that they're like, you never need to worry about it again. This will get you $1,000, whatever it is, like the promises that aren't actually backed with the how. And I think you are just incredibly good at being like, okay, this is what it actually takes. And I will partner with you. Right. And like, you asked me a lot of questions along the way of like, how are you actually going to use this? Right? Like, or how often do you get into this program, or like, how do you plan on using it? And just like really forced me to even think through, like, well, I don't know. I want it solved. And you're like, well, no, you actually need to think about, like, in your business,
Right.
like, what's the value of this piece?
Right. If you've hired someone to help you and they don't ask you any questions, I would be either you've told them everything they need to know right up front, which kudos to you for knowing what information they need. But more than likely, they're not using critical skills either to think through getting that created. And the end product just most likely will not be what you wanted it to be. It should be kind of a back and forth, like, and yeah, we'd have conversations at first. I'd ask you a bunch of questions, and I'd go work on it. Then I might come back with some more questions and be like, "Ooh, I need this one little piece here." But yeah, if you're not asking those questions and thinking through stuff at the beginning, the end product is just not going to be as good.
Right. Totally. Totally. And I think the other thing to think about, like in terms of this conversation, is and I think hiring specifically, like B-School, I guess actually all three of these, I think, would do this to some degree, but helping you come up with the systems that are the right systems for you and your business, because
there's so many options.
Invariably, right? Like I spent hours, I have tried out every email platform, dear Lord. And it was like your advice that was like, hey, why don't you try ConvertKit? And when I did, I was like, oh, this is what I've been missing all along, right? So there have been like some of those things that I've kind of discovered in my business as being like wanting to be really hands-on, as somebody who's pretty technologically capable, but also not wanting to spend all of my time like learning one specific tool or platform.
So I have one last question for you. We've talked about a lot of really great things. This has been a really fun conversation. But I would love if you, going back to your new astrology coaching business, to leave us with some like, what can we take from that? Where are we right now? And like kind of, this is turning into a much larger question.
I'll try to make my answer shorter than my first one.
But like, I mean, it's something that you do love to talk about. So like, how can we use the readings to help guide us in our business?
Yeah. So there's a couple things here. I think the first thing is that if you haven't ever gotten an astrology reading, you are not just your sun sign. So the thing about astrology that a lot of people react to is like either they don't relate to their sun sign at all, which was you, or they relate to their sun sign, but they feel like horoscopes are pithy and irrelevant.
Awesome.
Yeah. And all of that is valid. Thank the Lord that you're not like, such a stereotype or an archetype that you are the exact same as literally 1 out of every 12 people, right? Like there's only 12 types. But so the first thing to really understand is that astrology is actually much more complicated. And there are 144 data points in your astrological chart that inform your personality. And your sun sign is only one of those. And so at least having that and like get that reading and then decide whether or not it's something that is right for you or resonates with you. Don't write it off before you actually look at your full astrological chart. Okay. Number 2, I think that there's something really interesting in astrology that can help us like provide direction in terms of like astrology will tell you specifically where, like what paths in career will be beneficial for you and what sort of energies you can embody in order to find greater success. So there's some stuff specifically within that chart that's not just your sun sign that will help you. That's actually probably point 1B. I thought this was going to be a short answer and then I lied. Point number 2. So point number 2 is that I have found through understanding astrology that astrology is literally the best business plan that you could possibly come by. So if you follow all 12 of the energies over a solar cycle, so 1 full year, you will hit every aspect of your business that's necessary and critical for you to grow to the next level of success. Right? So instead of trying to like figure out like what's the thing that I need to do, you can just really look to astrology. And if you want to join, so I have a membership community that's like really about supporting people through this of like what's the astrological energy, how is it supporting you for that full calendar year so that you hit every aspect of your business and you don't need to wonder like what am I supposed to do. It's a full comprehensive business plan that tells you every month do this. And then the next month you get to shift gears and do the next thing.
Right.
Okay. My last point is what's going on now. So right now in the universe, in the sky, we have a lot of really kind of crazy cosmic energy. There's a lot going on. We are all feeling it. The one thing I just want to give everybody permission to do is right now we have, I think it's 5 planets in retrograde. We had 6. One just went out. Retrograde means that like the planet is not necessarily in the sky. It's not actually moving backwards, but it's a visual perception of moving backwards. And what that means is retrogrades are a great time to review, reassess, reevaluate, recalibrate. Anything that begins with a re, you do it, right? And of the 9 planets, we have 5 of them, most recent, almost 6, or just was 6 of them in that retrograde phase, like review, reassess. And so give yourself permission. This is a great time to be looking at your messaging, your strategy, what are your packages, having those one-on-one conversations with your ideal target audience and saying, hey, what in this resonates with you? What do you need? How can I be a better service? And take the pressure off of the financial growth right now, because now is not the time for new products, new offerings, like this big expansive growth. This is the time, at least through the end of the fall, this is the time to just be like, really being like, okay, do I have my systems? Do I have my stuff scrubbed so that when the energy is there, and it is coming, it will be there. There will be a vaccine to coronavirus, or, we'll get past this.
Right.
It's not going to happen. It's not going to last forever.
Yeah.
Our body will move and evolve. And when it does, like, you are in a place for go time. And if you miss the opportunity now to do all that back end work, you're going to feel rushed and feel frantic and not be in a place for growth. So that's my third point. Like, spend that time. Get with Taylor. If you're like, I am not a organized person, I can't figure this stuff out without some support, give Taylor a little holler.
Yeah, I love to organize. It's the weird, I don't know. I just do. My brain gets really excited. Yes, this is not going to last forever. I think Broadway was saying, if they were saying it's only intermission, but I've really started to like incorporate that into my language of like, this is only intermission. So like, what do you do during intermission? You go get another refreshment. You stretch your legs. You kind of, what you're saying, like you're in retrograde a little bit, like you're reflecting and what just happened in Act 1? Okay, let's get ready for Act 2, right? Like that's the way I've been saying this kind of pause on life. And I love Broadway and show that's kind of something that makes sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
But Krista, where can people find you online?
Okay, so this is the fun part about being a multi-passionate entrepreneur. You can find me in 2 spots, really. Well, 2 websites. And so what you can do, website number 1 is just go to KristaTrofka.com. That's where my public speaking business is. That's where you can kind of get into that groove around growth coaching and growth strategy. Spot number 2 is business-woo.com. That's where you can find out about astrologically based business coaching. But probably the easiest thing to do, honestly, is just hit me up on Instagram. Mm-hmm. So Instagram, Krista Trofka. If you're in my like worldview, if you're there, you're going to be hearing about stuff and things that I'm working on. And that's just like the best point of any departure, is just hang out with me on Instagram.
Yeah. And you're also pretty active on LinkedIn.
I am active on LinkedIn, yes. And that tends to be like a little bit more public speaking, growth coaching stuff, because that's my, Instagram is the professional platform.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I think this interview maybe went a little longer than we intended, but it was so valuable. I really enjoyed talking with you. Thanks so much. Be sure to subscribe, guys. And if there's any more interview series that you would like to see, just let me know in the comments below, and I will see you next week.